Today we're going to be talking about water and minerals. This will be divided into a few different sections, and we're going to start with water and the electrolytes. So water. Water is about 60% of the body weight. It's more if you're leaner and less if you have more body fat. 2/3 of it is found inside the cell and 1/3 outside the cell. Cell membranes are permeable to water, which means water can cross the membrane by osmosis to dilute the dissolved solutes. Blood pressure refers to the amount of force exerted by the blood against the walls of the arteries. And this is just a visual depicting where the water is and the distribution of water inside and outside the cells. Water isn't stored, so water in must equal water out. Water in involves the consumption of water, fluids, foods, and the production during cellular respiration. Water out involves the excretion in the urine and the feces, evaporation from the skin and the lungs, and sweating. The evaporation from skin and lungs is called insensible water loss, and sweating would be called sensible water loss since we can see it and feel it. This is just a visual depicting that water intake versus water output. When we look at water intake, it's stimulated by the thirst mechanism. Thirst signals arise when the thirst center in the brain senses a decrease in blood volume and an increase in concentration of dissolved substances. The mouth then becomes dry because less water is available to make saliva. Together, a dry mouth and the signals from the brain cause thirst and motivate fluid intake. As water is consumed, blood volume increases and solute concentration decreases, restoring water balance. A big problem we have here in the US is that often people have that thirst mechanism stimulated, but then they end up drinking things like soda or coffee or tea or things that might be diuretics, which ultimately might cause that solute concentration to keep going up and the blood volume to keep going down, making us more dehydrated. When we look at the regulation of water loss, the kidneys are going to function as a filter. Water moves from the blood into kidney tubules, and blood cells and proteins are too large and remain in the blood. Needed substances are reabsorbed back into the blood, and unneeded substances are excreted in the urine. That's why the urine gets very dark when we're dehydrated, because we keep reabsorbing the water to go back into our body if we aren't drinking enough fluid. Antidiuretic hormone, if more water is lost than taken in, then the concentration of solutes in the blood increases. This stimulates the thirst and secretion of the ADH, or antidiuretic hormone, from the brain. ADH then stimulates the kidneys to reabsorb water in order to keep the blood from becoming more concentrated. So when an individual hasn't consumed enough water, blood volume decreases and solute concentration in the blood increases. In response, the pituitary gland secretes ADH, or antidiuretic hormone. ADH then signals to the kidneys to increase the amount of water reabsorbed into the blood. Then less water is lost in the urine, and body water is conserved. Things like coffee, cranberry juice, tea, anything with caffeine in it, soda, also alcohol, they actually turn off antidiuretic hormone. That's why they're called diuretics. So they cause us to keep urinating even if we're dehydrated. Functions of water. It's a medium and participant in metabolic reactions. It helps regulate acid and base balance. It transports nutrients and wastes. It provides protection, and it regulates body temperature. Water also helps cool the body, so blood carries heat from the body's core to the capillaries near the surface of the skin. The heat's released from the skin into the environment. Water and sweat evaporates from the skin, causing heat to be lost. Evaporation cools the skin and the blood at the skin's surface. Then the cooled blood returns to the body's core. When we look at water in health and disease, without food, you could probably survive for a couple months. Without water, you could only survive a few days. And if you're in very extreme conditions, you might only be able to survive for a few hours. Too much water can also be a problem if it changes the osmotic balance. Too much water usually ends up happening by diluting sodium in the blood. That usually happens if somebody's sweating a whole bunch and not replenishing with water and salt. That could happen in, say, an ultra endurance event or something like that. Dehydration is a state that occurs when not enough water is present to meet the body's needs. It causes a reduction in blood volume, impairs the ability to deliver oxygen and nutrients to cells, and remove waste products. Symptoms of dehydration include thirst, headache, fatigue, loss of appetite, dry eyes, dry mouth, and dark-colored urine. If you think about it, the more darkness your urine has, the more dehydrated you are. You can be fooled by this. One, if you're taking a vitamin or mineral supplement, remember from the vitamins chapter, riboflavin is bright yellow, so that might end up looking like dehydration, but if it's really fluorescent colored, it's probably just your vitamin. Also, if you're on a lot of diuretics like coffee and tea, soda, alcohol, your urine might look clear, but you might still be in a dehydrated state because antidiuretic hormone was turning off. When we look at rehydration can really save lives, so we see somebody who's dehydrated, maybe it's in a developing country due to starvation and lack of water, or perhaps it's at an endurance race due to excessive sweating. But rehydration can really get somebody back to, normal pretty quickly. Water intoxication. Water intoxication happens when the intake's greater than loss. Sodium in the blood is diluted, causing hyponatremia. So hypo means low, and sodium is, the Na is the chemical symbol for sodium. Emia means in the blood. So water moves by osmosis from the blood into the tissues to try to dilute the higher concentration of solutes, and that causes tissue swelling or edema. When we look at meeting water needs, for men, the AI is considered 3.7 liters per day, and for women, 2.7. That is including water from food as well as water from drinks. The need increases with increased activity, increased temperature, decreased humidity, low-calorie diet, high-salt diet, high fiber intake, as well as alcohol intake. So is bottled water better? So when we look at the bottled water consumption, if water supply is unsafe, then bottled water could be better. However, in the US, there are a lot more regulations on tap water than there are on bottled water. So having tap water with a filter is probably the best idea in the US. However, if you travel somewhere like Mexico where the water might not be as safe and is regulated, then it is important to consume a bottled variety. So next we'll move on to an overview of minerals. There are 20 minerals needed by the body in small amounts. They have two functions. They can maintain structure, and they can also regulate chemical reactions and body processes. There are two types, the major minerals, in which we need more than 100 milligrams per day, and then the trace minerals, in which we need less than 100 milligrams per day. They can be divided into a few different functions. We have the major minerals, which are electrolytes, sodium, potassium, and chloride, and bone health, calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, and sulfur. Calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus are also considered electrolytes, but we don't need to regulate them as much as sodium, potassium, and chloride because they are found in the bone. Trace minerals are mostly involved in keeping blood health, energy metabolism, and antioxidant function. Fluoride, however, does help with bone health as well. When we look at minerals in our food, similar to vitamins, they come from plants and animals. They can be affected greatly by the amount of mineral in soil. They can also be affected by processing, so we could fortify things with minerals, or they could also be removed during processing, for example, by cooking or removing skin or the bran or the germ from grains. Absorption and bioavailability. They're inhibited by substances in plants, other minerals, or the amount in the body. When we look at minerals on my plate, as you can see again, grains and protein have very similar types of minerals. Vegetables, although the list isn't quite as long, are quite high in minerals. So vegetables would be, the most potent source of minerals, and grains and protein have the widest variety. There are a number of compounds that interfere with mineral absorption. Those include oxalates, which are found in spinach, rhubarb, beet greens, and chocolate. They can interfere with the absorption of calcium and iron. Tannins, found in tea and some grains, can interfere with iron as well. Phytates, found in whole grains, bran, and soy, can bind calcium, zinc, iron, and magnesium, limiting the absorption of these minerals. Phytates can be broken down by yeast, so if you're eating those from breads, then that could impact and make the bioavailability higher. So mineral functions, as an overview, they contribute to body structures, regulate body processes, regulate blood pressure, regulate water balance, regulate energy metabolism, affect growth and development through their role in the expression of genes, and act as cofactors needed for enzyme activity. So you can see this is very similar to vitamin functions, but minerals have that one extra function as electrolytes. So that ends our intro to water and minerals. Next time, we're going to be talking about the major electrolytes, sodium, potassium, and chloride, as well as bone health minerals, calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium.